survival of a God-led revival. The book of Nehemiah, which to get full understanding has to be conjoined with the book of Ezra. And to fully understand the Reformation and the reconstruction of Jerusalem that we focus on so much in the book of Nehemiah, but it is not all that the book of Nehemiah concerns. You have to understand that God desired a people in Israel and in Jerusalem to be the place and the people that he would get glory from and through in the earth. Jerusalem was the place that was deemed for the presence of God to be manifested in the glory that was to be revealed through the temple that Solomon had built. And Israel was a people that God had selected and chosen that he might get the glory through. Somewhere along the line, they lost contact and touch and passion for their God. And as a result, they lost their sense of worship. And when they ceased to give God his glory, he ceased to disperse his glory to them in the way that he had formerly done, and he called for them to be exiled out of the land into Babylonian captivity. But because of the covenant that God had made with Abraham and the promise that he had made with Abraham, he had to restore them to the place of glory, not for their restoration's sake, but for his own glory to be restored in the earth. That in order for men to know that he is God, his glory had to be revealed. And because he had promised Abraham, these were the people and the lineage that would come through him, that he would reveal his glory, he then begins to systematically restore the Israelites back to a place of former glory. And so you see a succession of moves that begins with Zerubbabel, where he takes the first wave of exiles back to Jerusalem, where they begin to reestablish or rebuild the temple of God. Then we see that there is a move of a second group of exiles, according to the timeline, that come back to Jerusalem with Ezra, so that Ezra, the scribe and priest, begins to instruct them again in the law or the word or the Mosaic law of God. And then the one that we seem to be most fascinated with and comprehend the most is the move by Nehemiah to come back and to rebuild or restore the walls that surround Jerusalem. And in the first 6 chapters of the book of Nehemiah, you see the story is centered around them rebuilding the wall. We get excited about the things that apply to man and apply to us, but the story is not centered solely around the rebuilding of the wall. That is one part of the book of Nehemiah. There are 6 chapters that talk about the rebuilding of the wall, but there are actually 13 chapters. And so in the 7th chapter, they begin to number the people. But then in the 8th chapter, something dramatic begins to happen, because in order for there to be physical reformation, in order for God to get his glory back, there also has to be spiritual reformation. And in order for there to be spiritual reformation, you have a people who are much like the church, who are coming back to Jerusalem, but they are half-hearted about their worship toward God. They are not fully passionate about the worship and the praise and their expression toward God. Mike, they are apathetic and lackadaisical in their approach to God. They are not conditioned really to give God the glory that he deserves. And so in order for it to happen, they have to go through another spiritual form of reformation, which is revival. Now, it is important to understand that the revival that I'm talking about is not like this patty cake revival stuff that we call revival in the church, where you plan it a year out and say that this week we're going to call in 5 preachers and we might show up there so many times a week, and and hear a sermon or two. I'm talking about God-led revival, not man-led revival. And in order for you to experience God-led revival, you have to be preconditioned to go through God-led revival, because God-led revival is not subject to man. It's where man subjects himself to God, and God is the object of the worship, and time is of no essence. Time is of no importance, because when revival breaks out, my God, I hope the Holy Spirit is going to help me today, because what you all don't understand, that revival is supposed to break out in here today. But just like the Israelites, you are not conditioned for revival. You are too time sensitive, too flesh oriented, and you don't understand that God is waiting to do something in this atmosphere, but you can't handle what God is getting ready to do. And so revival is being held up until God can recondition your mind and recondition your spirit. Help me, Holy Spirit, in here. And so the Israelites have to be reconditioned for a revival from God. The apathetic nature that is in them, the spiritual indifference that they have toward God, and the cold-heartedness they have toward God has to be moved out of the way. I was talking to Shep on yesterday, and we were talking about a half marathon that's going to come to Columbia, and we were talking about running and conditioning your bodies just to run a half marathon, 13 miles. A whole marathon is 26 miles. And so to run the half marathon, there has to be some daily conditioning where we got to begin, if we decide to run it, you got to begin to prepare ourselves daily by walking first and then getting to the point of running and building up your wind and your oxygen and getting everything in a place where you can handle and endure the marathon. See, what you have to understand, a revival is literally the marathon of worship. That if you're going to enter into a revival, you got to be able to endure the marathon that worship will take you on. And some of you who are sitting here, you're frustrating my spirit right now, and I'm going to have to make a homiletical turn right now and go and pull something from the end of the message and bring it back to the front of the message, because you're making me angry in my spirit, because you got an indifference even at what I'm saying right now. You're apathetic, and you're sitting there, and I can feel it in the atmosphere, and you're saying it don't take all that. We don't need to go through all that. That's because you are not conditioned to worship God in a way that he desires to be worshiped, and your mind is telling you that it don't take all that. Your pseudo-intellectualism is telling you that it don't take all that, but let me help you understand that it takes all that and more. I feel like I'm going to have to preach out of my oxygenated mind in here today. Allow me to pull from the end of the message when the Levites stood on the steps and declared that he is the Lord above heavens and he has made everything in the earth and everything that is on the earth. If you understood all that God has done just to keep you standing on the face of the earth, if you understood all, I need you to sit down for a moment, because I need to roll right here. I need you to hear what I'm about to say right now, because this ain't for my spiritual people. I know you want to go hog wild right now. I need y'all to be quiet for a few minutes, because I need to minister and reason with the intellectuals in the room who can't catch what's going on in the spirit. The ones, I just need y'all to just do me a favor. Shh, sit down just for a few minutes. I know you're going to bust, but you got to hold it for a few minutes, because I need to reason with the intellectuals like Paul did on Mars Hill right now. I need to talk to the pseudo philosophers in here who have made it up in their mind that all this crazy stuff we're trying to do for God is not necessary. As I said, it don't take all that. Let me borrow the phrase from the Levites. Let me borrow a phrase out of the book of Acts where it says, it's in him that we live, that we move, and that we have our being. And while you're sitting there thinking you don't need to do all that for God, refusing to move, you can't stop moving even if you refuse, because it's in him that you live, that you move, and that you have your being. So even when you are trying to stop, it's because of God you're still moving. Can I teach? Please sit down.